The harmattan winds that year carried more than the scent of dust and roasting goat. They carried the melodies of Christmas. In Ezimma Estate, every compound pulsed with life. The air thrummed with high-life music, the laughter of children weaving through the legs of dancing elders, and the clatter of pots promising a feast. It was a tapestry of pure, unadulterated joy, a celebration of family and the year's end. I remember the warmth of it all, the feeling that our small community was the brightest star in the night sky. But even then, amidst the vibrant colors of Usso Ebby and the glow of bonfires, a shadow was creeping in. I saw it in my grandmother's eyes. While she smiled and clapped along with the music, a deep, unsettling fear flickered within her gaze as she watched us, as if seeing ghosts among the living. Far from the laughter, at the edge of the village where the forest reclaimed the land, Mama Nkiru stood watching. She was ancient, a relic of a forgotten time. A serene, almost beatific smile graced her lips as she arranged strange, dark artifacts on the ground. Her gnarled hands beginning the deliberate, silent motions of a ritual older than Ezimma itself. The first sign that something was wrong was the music. The cheerful guitar riffs began to warp, stretching and groaning into a discordant wail before vanishing into an abrupt, chilling silence. A low tremor ran through the earth, not violent but deep and resonant, like a giant turning in its sleep. One by one, the festive fires that had lit our faces with a warm orange glow sputtered, flickered, and died, plunging the celebration into a sudden, disorienting darkness. A scream cut through the confused murmurs. From a freshly dug grave at the edge of the burial grounds, a hand caked in red earth clawed its way into the night. It was Elder Chukwudi, a man we had buried only a week prior. Panic, raw and primal, exploded through the crowd as more figures began to rise, their movements stiff and unnatural. The joyous gathering became a scene of pure carnage. Before I could process the horror, a firm hand gripped my arm, pulling me from the chaos. It was my grandmother, her face a mask of grim determination. We slipped into the shadows, the screams of our neighbors echoing behind us as the village we knew was consumed. In a small, musty room hidden behind a tapestry in our compound, she finally spoke, her voice a strained whisper. She revealed a secret buried for generations, a story of a great betrayal, a promise broken by our ancestors against Mama Nkiru's lineage. This night, this gruesome rising was not a random act of evil. It was vengeance, meticulously planned and centuries in the making. With the terrible weight of this knowledge settling upon us, my grandmother became our unwilling leader. Her goal was not to fight the abominations outside. She knew that was impossible. Instead, she guided a small, terrified group of us, myself included, on a desperate mission to perform a counter-ritual. It was a rite of containment, a plea for preservation, not victory. What followed was a blur of heart-stopping tension. We crept through the darkness, gathering sacred herbs from desecrated gardens, their leaves slick with something other than dew. All the while, the guttural groans of the risen were a constant, horrifying chorus just beyond our sight. We worked feverishly to draw a protective circle of ash and salt around a single compound, our hands trembling as we chanted the ancient words my grandmother dictated. The barrier shimmered into existence just as the first of them shambled into view. As the first hint of dawn painted the eastern sky a bruised purple, a stillness fell. The risen, caught by the morning light, crumpled to the ground, dormant once more. We had survived the night, but we had not won. Looking out from our fragile sanctuary, I saw the ruins of my home. Ezimma was no longer a village. It was a tomb, silent and cold. We had paid the price for our ancestors' sins, and our survival was a horrifying testament to the truth that had been buried with the dead. Few years back when it all started, in a time before memory, the Ezimma Estate flourished under a benevolent sun, a haven of prosperity cradled by the earth itself. The harvests were always plentiful, the river ran clear and cool, and the laughter of healthy children was the village's most cherished song. At the heart of this vibrant community was Nkiru, a priestess whose youth was as radiant as the dawn. She was the chosen guardian of the old ways, her spirit woven into the very fabric of the land. When she performed the rituals of blessing, the air itself seemed to hum with life, her hands coaxing forth the earth's bounty, and her voice soothing the spirits that dwelled in the trees and streams. Nkiru was more than just a priestess. She was the soul of Ezimma. She moved through the village with a grace that spoke of her deep connection to all living things. The villagers revered her, seeking her wisdom and her gentle touch. She would often be found among the children, telling them ancient stories of the land, her eyes sparkling with kindness and profound love for her people. In her, the villagers saw their protector, the living embodiment of the traditions that had kept them safe and prosperous for generations. She was the anchor that held their world in balance, the conduit through which the blessings of the land flowed. Then a shadow fell upon the sun-drenched fields. A creeping blight, foul and relentless, blackened the crops, turning the vibrant green stalks into withered, decaying husks. Sickness soon followed, a phantom that stole the breath from the weak and cast a pall of fear over every household. The laughter of children was replaced by a chorus of coughs and mournful cries. Panic, a seed of poison, began to sprout in the hearts of the villagers. Chief Adewale, a man whose ambition had long been eclipsed by Nkiru's spiritual authority, saw his opportunity in the village's despair. He grew jealous of the devotion she commanded, a power he could neither understand nor control. Harnessing the growing terror, Adewale began to whisper insidious lies to the Council of Elders. He twisted their fear into a weapon, convincing them that Nkiru's magic, once their salvation, was now the source of their suffering. The accusation, once spoken, spread like the blight itself. In a heartbreaking turn, the very people Nkiru had dedicated her life to protecting turned on her. They dragged her to the village square, their faces contorted with a mixture of fear and hatred. Stones and insults rained down upon her as they stripped her of her sacred robes, tearing away the symbols of her power and her identity. Her pleas for reason were lost in the roar of the mob, and she was cast out, exiled into the unforgiving wilderness to face a slow, lonely death. Broken and starving, Nkiru wandered through the wilderness, a ghost haunted by the betrayal of her people. Her body grew weak, her spirit frayed, until she finally collapsed on the cold stone floor of a forgotten shrine. It was a gnarled, crumbling place, hidden deep within the forest, dedicated to a forbidden deity whose name had not been spoken for an age. Lying on the brink of death, adrift in a sea of despair and grief, she cried out. She called for any power, any entity, any spirit that would listen to her pain and witness her unjust suffering. From the deepest shadows of the shrine, a presence answered. It manifested as a swirling vortex of darkness, an ancient and formidable spirit drawn to the raw power of her anguish. It offered her a pact, a bargain forged in the crucible of her torment. It would give her the power for vengeance, the strength to make those who had wronged her feel the full weight of their betrayal. In exchange, it demanded her eternal service. With nothing left to lose and a heart consumed by sorrow, Nkiru accepted. A torrent of dark energy flooded her being, aging her in an instant. Her youthful radiance withered, her skin wrinkled like ancient parchment, and her hair turned the color of ash. The deep love she once held for her people curdled into a cold, singular purpose to enact a curse that would make Ezimma pay, not just for betraying her, but for abandoning the sacred traditions she had sworn to protect. A serene, terrifying smile graced her lips as she gazed at the distant village, her new dark purpose now set in motion. Back to where we are now. The morning light was a liar. It filtered through the gaps in our hastily drawn circle, a shimmering chalk line meant to ward off evil, and painted our faces in shades of false hope. We were survivors, but we were also prisoners. The dawn had forced the risen back into a slumbering stillness, but it hadn't banished them. They lay scattered across the village square, frozen in their final agonized moments, waiting for the sun to die again. Our circle was a cage, not a fortress. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of fear and antiseptic herbs. We tended to the wounded, their groans a low counterpoint to the chilling silence outside. My grandmother, her face a mask of weary resolve, looked out at the dormant horrors. "We cannot win by hiding," she said, her voice a low, gravelly whisper that cut through the quiet despair. "The chalk will fade. The night will return. We must go to the source." Her eyes found mine, and I knew what she meant. We had to go on the offensive, to venture into the heart of the curse and destroy the fetish that gave Mama Nkiru her power. It was a suicide mission, but it was our only chance. A small group formed around me, their faces grim but their eyes burning with a desperate fire. There was Kofi, whose hands were as steady with a machete as they were with a needle and thread. Amara, whose knowledge of the old paths was our only map, and young Ife, who had lost everything and had nothing left to fear. We shared a final, somber look with those who remained, a silent promise to return, and stepped over the chalk line. The air outside was cold, heavy with the metallic tang of dried blood and dormant magic. Our journey was a walk through a waking nightmare. We moved through the ruins of our own village, a graveyard of familiar places now tainted by monstrous stillness. The risen were everywhere, their bodies contorted in unnatural poses. I had to force myself not to look at their faces, not to recognize the butcher, the weaver, the child I used to tell stories to. Tension coiled in my gut with every step. A hand twitched nearby, its fingers clenching and unclenching with leftover energy. A low guttural groan escaped a body slumped against a wall, making my heart leap into my throat. The path led us away from the village and into the gnarled embrace of the forest, where the mist clung to the ground like a shroud and the silence grew heavier, more oppressive. Mama and Kiru's hut stood in a clearing choked with dead leaves and twisted roots. It looked as if it had been vomited up by the forest itself. We pushed open the warped door and found her waiting. She sat on a simple stool, a serene, chilling smile on her lips that was more terrifying than any snarl. Behind her, on a crude stone altar, was the source of our suffering, a grotesque fetish of blackened bone, human hair, and dark cloth. It pulsed with a faint, sickly purple light, a corrupt heartbeat echoing in the small space. She didn't move as we entered. Instead, the hut itself came alive. The wooden walls groaned and splintered, lunging at us like spears. The very floorboards tried to trip us to ensnare our feet. It was chaos. Kofi's machete deflected a flying shard of pottery while Amara dodged a lashing vine that snaked down from the ceiling. Mama and Kiru just watched, her smile never faltering, as we fought against her domain. I scrambled toward the altar, her magic tearing at my clothes, the air thick with the smell of ozone and decay. My fingers closed around the fetish. It was cold, vibrating with malevolent power. With a final desperate roar, I smashed it against the stone altar. A blinding shockwave of white light erupted, blasting the hut apart. When my vision cleared, we were standing in the ruins. Outside, in the dawning light, the bodies of the risen were turning to ash, carried away on the morning breeze. We had won. But as Mama and Kiru's physical form dissolved into a column of swirling shadow, her laughter echoed through the clearing, a cold, cruel sound that promised this was not the end. The laughter faded, but the chill remained. The curse was broken, but its master was not gone. I stood among the wreckage, the dust of my neighbors settling around my feet, and knew this victory was only a reprieve. The war had just begun. The dust settled, not in a gentle, poetic way, but in a thick, choking blanket that coated everything. A final insult from the crumbled risen. We stood amidst the ruins of our village, the survivors of a war no one would ever sing songs about. Sunlight, bright and indifferent, cut through the haze, illuminating the fine gray powder that was once Mama and Kiru's army. We had won. The thought was a hollow stone in my gut. Slowly, the others emerged from the fortified compound, blinking in the sudden quiet. Their eyes, wide with the terror they had held back, scanned the devastation. There was a collective intake of breath, a shared moment of relief, but it curdled almost instantly into a wave of profound grief. No cheers rose to the sky, only the soft, broken sounds of weeping as people found the remains of their homes, the ghosts of their families. The silence that followed was heavier than any battle cry. This wasn't peace. It was just a different kind of death, a stillness that stretched over our graveyard of a home. We were victors standing on a tomb. Weeks bled into one another, marked by the rhythmic, futile sounds of rebuilding. We hammered and sawed, trying to piece back together a life that no longer fit. But a sickness had taken root in the very soil beneath our feet. The yams we planted grew stunted and twisted, their flesh a sickly pale white. Water drawn from the well, once a source of life, now tasted of ash and sorrow. A cough began to spread, a dry, rattling thing that settled deep in our chests and refused to leave. The world itself felt wrong, skewed. I saw a shadow detach itself from its owner, slithering across a wall like a living thing. A child's wooden doll discarded in the dirt rocked back and forth on its own, and sometimes carried on the wind we would hear it, the faint, chilling echo of Mama and Kiru's laughter. It was grandmother, her body now as frail as a dried leaf, who finally gave voice to our terror. Her words fell like stones into the growing pool of our fear. Smashing the fetish hadn't killed the witch. It had only broken her cage. Her essence, unbound and furious, had bled into the land, poisoning it, becoming it. The community, once bound by a common enemy, began to fray. Fear, sharp and acidic, corroded our bonds, curdling into a dark paranoia. A drop tool, a misplaced ration, These became catalysts for bitter accusations and screaming matches. We were turning on each other, haunted by nightmares of Mama and Kiru's smiling, triumphant face. I watched it happen, this slow, insidious rot, and realized the truth. The battle with the Risen, the physical clash of wood against bone, had been the easy part. It was merely the prologue. Our new war was a spiritual one, a fight for the very soul of our home. The enemy was no longer a shambling corpse we could strike down. It was the air we breathed, the water we drank, the ground that was supposed to sustain us. As I stood at the edge of the village, staring at the diseased horizon, a grim certainty settled over me. Our first task was to survive. This next one felt far more impossible. We had to find a way to heal a world that had been cursed, to banish a spirit that, in its freedom, had become as powerful and pervasive as a god. The madness took root quickly, like a fast-growing blight. It began with whispers, then accusations. Neighbors who had shared meals for generations now pointed fingers, their eyes wide with paranoia. "Witch!" they'd scream, seeing shadows where none existed. They hoarded rotted yams, believing them blessed, and argued with empty spaces as if fending off invisible monsters. A poison had seeped into Ezimma, but it wasn't one that sickened the body. It was a sickness of the soul, a slow-burning fever of the mind that was tearing our community apart at the seams. I tried to be a voice of reason, to remind them of who we were, but my words were lost in the rising tide of hysteria. Desperate, I went to my grandmother, the last bastion of the old ways. I found her frail and bedridden, her breath shallow as a whisper of wind. The madness had touched her too, but in her it manifested as a quiet, weary acceptance. With what little strength she had left, she clutched my hand and revealed our last desperate hope. We could not fight this spirit, she rasped. We could not banish it. We had to heal it. Her fingers, gnarled like ancient roots, pressed a small wooden charm into my palm. It was warm to the touch, humming with a faint energy. My grandmother's instructions were a map to a place we had long tried to forget. I was to go to the scar, the crumbling, forgotten shrine, wherein Kiru had spilled her blood and forged her pact with a power far older than our village. It was there, at the heart of our collective wound, that I was to perform a ritual of atonement. The journey itself was a descent into a nightmare. The familiar forest twisted around me, its trees contorting into screaming, agonized faces. The air grew thick with the whispers of Mama and Kiru, a constant, seductive torment promising me the very power that had corrupted her, offering revenge against a world that had wronged us both. The illusions were suffocating, but the small charm my grandmother had given me pulsed with a soft, steady light, a tiny beacon pushing back the deepest shadows and keeping my path true. I finally stumbled into a clearing and saw it. The shrine was a ruin choked with vines and decay. In its center, a dark, indelible stain marked the earth, the very spot where Enkiru's life and hope had ended. My hands trembled as I recalled my grandmother's words. I was not to draw a circle of salt or warding. I was not to build a defense. Instead, I knelt upon the blighted ground, my knees pressing into the cursed soil. Holding the charm out before me, I offered a simple, heartfelt apology to the wounded land and to the grieving spirit of the woman our ancestors had so terribly wronged. As words of sorrow for their fear and remembrance for her loss left my lips, the world dissolved. I was no longer in a ruin, but standing in a tranquil, moonlit clearing. Before me stood Nkiru, not as the monster of legend, but as the young priestess she once was. Her eyes brimming with not hatred, but a profound and unbearable sadness that spanned centuries. She did not speak, but in her silence I understood everything. I didn't beg for her forgiveness, it wasn't mine to ask for. Instead, I apologized for the fear that drove my ancestors to betrayal. I offered not to banish her, but to remember her. I swore an oath to rebuild her shrine, to clear her name, and to restore her to her rightful place as the true guardian of Ezimma. A single black tear traced a path down her spectral cheek. As it fell and touched the ground, the blighted land in the vision around us began to bloom with life once more. But as Nkiru's form started to fade, a vast, ancient shadow detached itself from her spirit. The pact was broken. The ancient spirit, the true source of the curse, was free, and its malevolent, glowing eyes fixed upon me. Reality shattered back into place with the force of a physical blow. The ground shook and the last stones of the crumbling shrine tumbled around me. From the deepest shadows, a guttural voice echoed, thick with primordial rage. "You have taken my prize, now you will take her place." I was alone, the charm in my hand now cold and lifeless, facing an enemy far older, far more powerful, and whose attention I had just so foolishly earned. The air in the shrine shatters. The ancient spirit's voice, a tremor that shakes the very stones, booms from the abyss. "You will be my vessel," it roars, a promise and a damnation. Shadows writhe and bleed from the corners of the sacred space, coalescing into a suffocating vortex that spirals around me. A cyclone of pure malice. There is no physical blow, no rending of flesh. Instead, the assault is on my soul. A tidal wave of psychic agony crashes over me. Visions of Nkiru's centuries-long torment. The sting of betrayal. The white-hot rage of a spirit poisoned. I see every moment of her suffering. Feel every ounce of her anguish as if it were my own. The entity offers this immense corrosive power to me, demanding I become the new instrument of its unending vengeance. I collapse to my knees, a scream tearing from my throat, a sound born not just of pain, but of the sheer crushing weight of the hatred being forced into the hollows of my being. This is not a pact being offered. It is a hostile takeover of my spirit. The spirit of Ezimma is claiming its host. Just as the last vestiges of my will begin to dissolve into the encroaching darkness, a soft ethereal light pierces the gloom. It is a gentle dawn breaking through a storm. From this light emerges the serene spirit of the young Nkiru. Not the vengeful warrior, but the gentle priestess. Her form a shield of pure, calming luminescence. She glides towards me, her expression one of deep sorrow, not for herself, but for the land, for the spirit, for me. She places a cool, steady hand on my forehead, and her touch does not fight the darkness. Instead, it grants a profound and sudden clarity. The roiling chaos in my mind stills, and I see the truth. The ancient spirit is not inherently evil. It is a fundamental part of the land, a force of natural balance that was twisted and corrupted by the poison of human betrayal. It does not desire vengeance for its own sake. It is the embodiment of imbalance, a wound that festers and feeds on the very hatred it creates. Nkiru shows me a vision of the past, how she, in her time, kept the spirit calm not with shows of power, but with reverence, respect, and an abiding love for the land it protected. She reveals the path forward. The only way to defeat the shadow is to starve it of the hate it craves. Armed with this new understanding, a different kind of strength floods my veins. It is not the strength of a fighter, but of a healer. I push myself to my feet, my legs trembling but my resolve firm. I look past the terrifying, swirling vortex of shadow and speak not to the monster, but to the land itself, to the spirit within. "I will not be your sword," I declare, my voice ringing with a newfound authority. Instead of accepting the pact of vengeance, I make a new vow, a promise whispered to the soil and the trees. "I will be your guardian." I vow to remember Nkiru's name not as a curse but as a blessing. I vow to heal the community, to mend the broken trust, to honor the forgotten traditions, and to restore the balance that was shattered so long ago. I accept this burden, not as a curse to be endured, but as a sacred duty to be fulfilled. It is a vow of peace, of forgiveness, and of unwavering responsibility. I offer no anger, no fear, no hatred for the spirit to consume. I offer only my resolve. The effect is immediate and absolute. The ancient spirit recoils as if struck by a physical blow. Starved of the negative energy it so desperately needs to sustain its monstrous form, it begins to thin, its edges fraying like smoke. Its solid, terrifying presence dissipates, its form becoming translucent, ethereal. It is not being destroyed. It is receding, its immense power waning as my vow of healing fills the spiritual void it once occupied. The guttural, world-shaking roars fade into the gentle sigh of the wind rustling through the leaves. The oppressive darkness that has choked the shrine for centuries finally lifts. Pure, clean sunlight breaks through the dense canopy for the first time in generations, bathing the stone altar in a warm glow. The dead, thorny vines that have strangled the shrine crumble to dust, revealing fresh green shoots pushing their way towards the light. The land of Ezimma takes its first deep cleansing breath. I stand alone in the now peaceful shrine, weary but resolute. I am no longer just a survivor caught in a nightmare. I am the first guardian of the new Ezimma. This is not the end. The curse is broken. But the true work, the long, patient work of healing has only just begun.